Hi, this is Loral and welcome back. We are in a series, 4 videos back to back, 4 days in a row. Part 1, part 2 now is with Jim Britt, letting go, how to create unlimited wealth, joy, and self-mastery in your life. So in part 2, we're going to talk about you can't move forward if you're stuck in the past. And so many of you, your whole conversation is history related. So you'll have no idea what happened to me back then. We have people literally that are clients of ours that still are stuck from 8, 9, and 10 when they had their real estate busts and they went from a millionaire to nothing or very little that they had left. And they won't go again because they're stuck in the past and they don't trust themselves to go. So specifically, Jim and I are going to point to identify what you're holding on to. You get a benefit for every behavior. So there's got to be something you're holding on to for some, emotion that you get out of having and holding on to it. And we're going to talk about how do you stop creating the same pain over and over and over, calling it protection like it's going to save you when you really just have to have some courage to step forward. So let's go listen in.
Now, let me ask you a question or a few questions. Number one, can you see anything that's not harmful or stressful to hang on to that and keep reliving it? Even if the answer is no, then let's move to the next question. Do you want to let it go? You want to let it go. I'm not asking you to let it go, but do you want to? And if the answer is yes, let's move to the next question. This is a tougher one, though. Are you willing to let it go?
Right.
Because the next question, you're no longer going to have an excuse. So are you willing to let that go? And I've had people say, well, let me think about it for a while, or let me maybe after lunch, or I'll think about it overnight. I'll get back with you tomorrow. Or, they want to hang on to that because they think it's some form of protection that keeps them from re-experiencing it again. But it's really not. What it does is it puts you in that circumstance over and over and over again. So you got to let it go.
But don't you find, Jim, that the reason that a lot of them aren't willing to, there's the fear that they created around it, but there's what I'm going to call the lie, right? So, but that lie has them mask that if I keep doing this, I'll be successful. Like I see that a lot in very successful people, and they're holding on to a lot of interesting things that aren't really serving them, but their identity to how they're behaving is so driven to their success that if they lose this, they'll lose this. I see that all the time. How do you handle that one? That's a little more complex when they've associated something positive.
Letting go is about anything in your life. We develop skill sets in our life. You're skilled at making money. You're skilled at what you do as a speaker. I'm skilled at that, but somebody else may be skilled at making billions of dollars.
Mm-hmm.
But when you really look at their life, are they really happy overall? Are they fulfilled in life? I've met mega millionaires that were angry and that they just need to run over people to get all the money they needed. And you look at them and they're not very happy looking and, 100 pounds overweight, so they're good at one thing and they focus on that one thing. But I think to have a good balanced life is you've got to look at each area of your life and ask yourself, is this moving me in the direction I want to go? And the willingness to let something go that's happened to you in the past, because it happened in the past, it's not happening to you now. Just like the woman that was hanging on to the abuse from her father, didn't take her long to figure out that, but she'd never looked at it that way.
Right.
Until I asked the questions. So are you willing to let it go? And if you're willing to, the next question is when. A woman came up to me one time. She said, can you help me stop smoking? And I said, I don't know, maybe. I said, can you see anything that's not harmful or harmful to your health, that's not harmful to your health with smoking? And she said, no, I know it's not good for me. And I said, do you ever think of your kids? She had 4 kids. I said, do you ever think of her kids losing her mom from lung cancer or something? No, I never really thought about that. I said, well, something you might want to think about. I said, do you want to quit? She said, well, I've tried 20 different things. I said, no, I didn't ask you that. I said, do you want to quit? And she said, yes, I do. I said, are you willing to? And she's the one that hesitated too. And finally she said, yes, I'm willing to. And I said, when? And she said, right now.
Good.
So we took a break for lunch. I watched her. She walked out on the patio of the hotel and she pulled out a cigarette, put it in her mouth. She lit it. And she pulled it out and threw it on the ground and stepped on it. And I said, so I told her later, I said, I saw you out there. She said, you know what? I took a puff of that cigarette and it just tasted nasty. And she's never smoked one since. It's been years ago. You got to be willing to do that stuff. Yeah, some people get abused. They get all kinds of things happen, but you got to move past that. And I think a lot of people spend about 70% of their time trying to control things over which they have no control.
Mm-hmm.
And when you look at that, if you could just stop doing that, you'll double your output.
Yeah, and more joy and happiness. Jim, I'm going to take you back to, Bob Proctor says between the ages of, 0 and say 7 or 8, you said 0 and 6, it's in the range. We all know, and all that development, all that emotional development, psychological development, spiritual development happens then. So for the people who heard earlier, well, you got to know your core belief. How do you take someone on that journey? Like you took us on a journey on, are you willing to and when, on how to let go? So great steps to that. And those of you listening, if there's something you need to let go back and rewind, listen to especially the sequence of questions is just so it works. I mean, I use it, you use it, it's always worked. But go to core belief. Some people use the word fear. I'm going to use the word lie to themselves. That's a core belief when they really don't know what's driving them because they don't know how to associate the core belief to the result or the thing that they're trying to hold on to.
When I discovered this concept about 35 years ago, and refined it over a couple of years and learned how to get to that core belief, I started looking at myself and I thought, okay, how was I raised? Well, the first 6 years of life, we didn't even have electricity. I lived in the backwoods of Oklahoma. I didn't know we didn't have electricity. We just never had it. And then I remember moving into the first home where we had indoor plumbing and a toilet. And, I flushed that thing a million times just to watch the water go down. And I thought we were in a castle or something. It was kind of a shack anyway, but it had running water and a bathroom and all of the amenities. But we were poverty stricken. Mm-hmm. I mean, we had food most of the time. Sometimes we had, for dinner, we'd have a glass of buttermilk with cornbread in it, and that was it. It filled up your stomach. I don't think we knew the difference, except money was always an issue. I hear my parents talk about it all the time. I don't know if we can pay the rent. I don't have money for gas. I don't have money for food. How are we going to feed the kids? So you get programmed with that. And I had probably the most loving, caring parents ever. My mom she'd take clothes off her back to give to somebody. They needed it worse than she did. We had a homeless person come to our door one night. We're all splitting up food for the 6 of us. And he knocks on the door. She goes to the door and he's begging for food. And she invited him in, pulled up another chair and split it 7 ways instead of 6. And I'm looking at that going, well, what the hell? My food.
I need more. Yeah.
That's just the way she was. But the money was an issue. And when I mentioned earlier, I made my first $1 million, it didn't take me very long to spend that. Mm-hmm. Because I still had that poverty mentality that I had to work, and make the money and then, barely get by. And I almost went back there. And I caught myself when I started learning this, especially, that I was in control of that. And it's not happening to me now. And there's plenty of prosperity in the world.
Hey, this is Loral. I hope you liked part 2 of our 4-part series with myself and Jim Britt. I want you now to subscribe to my channel. Click that notification button. Please be here 5 days a week. I'm here for you. You be here for you and your family. Take notes, take actions. What are you going to learn? What are you going to do? And if you ever have questions, go to askloral.com, ASKLORAL, ask a question and make a request. We'll be back tomorrow.